The rap world is sadly full of people who decide to live the life versus just making music, and as a result of that, many of them end up in trouble with the law, to the extent that some very famous rappers have been to jail for multiple reasons, and others seem to skirt the law just enough to stay out of jail, but their time is inevitably going to come. And then there's the case of YNW Melly, who was arrested for a very serious crime in 2018, but only now are things moving, and according to his mother, it might be moving in a way that is beneficial to him. We'll break it down for you, but before we do that, go ahead and do us a favor by leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the bell icon so you never miss an upload from us. Do you want to win an iPhone 13 Pro Max? Maybe a MacBook Pro? How about $500 cash? You decide. All you have to do is comment the secret hidden message somewhere in this video. That's it. Oh, and leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep affording these giveaways. Winners will be announced on the last day of each month. Thanks for watching and good luck. And with that being said, let's get straight into the video. YNW Melly situation. To say that all that has been going on with YNW Melly has been taking its sweet time would be the understatement of the century, because this case is literally years in the making. And while some might be thinking that some good is heading his way, the facts and history of the case state otherwise. So let's start there, shall we? October 26th of 2018 was the date that set everything in motion. YNW Melly went to the hospital to get help for two of his friends. Well, not exactly. That's what he said, but that's not what happened. Rather, he had his friend Cortland Henry go to the hospital to get help for his two friends Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas Jr. According to Cortland, when he reported the incident, him and his friends were driving out in the town in the early parts of the morning after a recording session when they were caught in a drive-by. By his account, a car pulled up to the passenger side of the car and unloaded on them. A tragic tale, one that ended in reality when Williams and Thomas Jr. died while Cortland was unharmed. But as we all learned fairly quickly, what was stated by Cortland and by extension Melly was not what happened in the slightest. As investigators examined the car, they realized that certain things didn't line up as they should. For example, the car seemed to be relatively undamaged outside of only 8 holes, which wouldn't line up with a drive-by if they were unloaded upon by multiple people. Those small details very much add up, not to mention the way his friends were hit and killed didn't line up either with a drive-by story. Investigators thoroughly examined the scene and found evidence that the drive-by was indeed an inside job that YNW Melly was a part of. Usually the bullet shell flies either backwards or to the side of the firearm, not in front of it. Even in close proximity, it wouldn't have ended up as it was in the car. In this case, the left rear side of the car, which is the opposite side of where the holes were located. Not the answers they were expecting to find, and that's never a good sign, as that means someone was lying, or in this case, multiple people were. As the investigation into what really happened continued, they eventually found video evidence that showed Cortland, Williams, Thomas Jr., and YNW Melly getting into the car that others would be hurt in, and in the back left seat of the car where the casings were found was none other than YNW Melly. When they later asked Melly why he didn't come to the hospital with Cortland, he claimed that he needed to clear his head and used another car to get away from the spot of the attack. Not exactly the most convincing statement, wouldn't you say? What police deduced was that all four did indeed get into the car, but then YNW Melly went and took out Williams and Thomas Jr. Then, to help sell the lie, the two went and drove the car around to help create a story for themselves via the drive-by scenario, and then they separated so no one could be clear while others make a dramatic story about getting help at the hospital. After these key details were discovered, both Melly and Cortland were arrested for the deaths of the two, and the long walk towards punishment began. And we do mean the long road, as things haven't gone to plan in various ways, not the least of which was due to world events like a pandemic. But the thoughts on what might happen to Melly were never really in doubt. Crimes get punishment. YNW Melly over the last 4-ish years has been living out part of his punishment for the acts he did by being in jail without a chance for release. And based on the seriousness of his crimes, the punishment that he was originally facing was a long one, potentially even life in prison. Killing someone is considered the worst crime of all, and the punishment is always severe, even if it was an accident. What might be even worse than the acts of doing it himself is that he not only tried to cover it up, he had Cortland lie about what happened in order to hide what happened. So that's 2 people gone, a cover-up, and technically, conspiracy. And it's believed to have been premeditated, and thus it could be construed as an even more heinous crime, thus requiring a deeper punishment than before. But if you listen to the prosecutors on the case, not only do they intend to put Melly away, they want to give him the maximum punishment possible. Prosecutor's case. So, what did we mean by that last statement? Prosecutors are reportedly working hard to try and get YNW Melly into the execution chair, presenting 66 new pages of DNA evidence that prove that he pulled the trigger and killed his 2 friends. According to a report from DJ Academics, who has long been an insider for the rap world, things aren't looking good for Melly in terms of what the prosecution has against him. Last month, 66 new pages of DNA DNA evidence had been presented by prosecutors, reportedly proving that the gunshots were fired from YNW Melly's seat in the car, using phone records to show that the rapper was in the area at the time of the shooting. Ballistics report shows that all the shots that were fired came from Melly's position in the car, and surveillance footage allegedly shows Melly getting into the vehicle in the seat that the shots were fired from, all of which for YNW Melly especially is bad. But if you can believe it, there's still more. Evidence was also presented from the drive-by shooting that Melly and his partner said happened, but they feel they can prove it didn't happen the way they claimed, and in fact happened after they had already killed the other two. All this goes to prove one fact about this case, that YNW Melly not only executed his former friends in cold blood, but he did his best to hide it, as noted before and now. And if you caught the verbiage from earlier, that wasn't a misspoken phrase. Prosecutors are very much going not for life in prison, which many would agree would have been fair with the crimes he committed. They're going straight for the death penalty. The prosecutors' new look at the crime indicates that they feel that YNW Melly was cold and ruthless, and thus doesn't deserve to live in prison for the rest of his days. To some, this may seem like a bit much, but given the heinous nature of the crime and the fact that they are in a state that allows the death penalty to be a punishment, this actually is a viable option. Now, to be clear, there are still things in the works right now, and just because they're trying to get this penalty doesn't mean that they'll actually get it approved by the judge and jury. That being said, given the nature of the crime, the evidence that the prosecution has, and the intent that they now have to put him to death, it would have to be a really good counter-argument / defense to try and get Melly out of the situation that he's very much put himself in. And for him, time is very much running out, getting the trial ready. So if you're wondering what's coming up for this situation as a whole, we're honestly really close to the trial actually starting. It took 4 years because of COVID and other factors, but given the prosecution is aiming for the death penalty and feels it has the evidence to convict, things are finally starting to move in a major way. Interestingly, earlier in March, Melly tried to get his trial sped up, which is his right, but then he canceled the request. His team stated that they would take the extra time in order to make sure that both sides were ready to proceed, though we're not sure we buy that, because the prosecution seems locked and loaded and ready to go, while they're betting that Melly's team is scrambling to provide a good defense. After all, if they had the evidence to clear him by now, they would have presented it, and this wouldn't need to go to trial, now would it? Jury selection is expected to start on the 4th of April, and the trial itself will start soon after. This is very much a trial a long time coming, and many are very eager to see what's going to happen with Melly in one form or another. Based on what happened, the evidence collected, and so on, it doesn't look good for Melly. That's not to say he can't pull something out of a trial, but when you look at all the facts, it's clear that he's not in for the smoothest of rides. And yet, there is someone out there who not only believes in his innocence, but believes he'll be released soon enough. Number 1, the mother's words. This is where a potential plot twist comes in, because YNW Melly's own mother stated that her son is coming home this April or May. That is a very bold claim to make for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is that it's near the end of March right now, and Melly's trial hasn't even started yet. What's more, that would seem to imply that she has information about him getting released in some form, and yet there's no one else stating such a thing. To be fair, this is hardly the first time she's made such comments. Long before recent developments, she said that her son would be home to her soon enough, and that turned out to be quite false. Frankly, the only way that he's going to go home is via getting an innocent verdict at trial, and the prosecution has been implying very heavily that this is not the verdict that will be given. So, why did she say it? Maybe she felt she needed home. Maybe she wanted to put some positive vibes out there for her son to let him know that she expects him home soon. It's really hard to say. We don't want to put a damper on things for her, but it's very much looking that she won't have her son home anytime soon. And there you go, everyone. A look at the case and crimes of YNW Melly and why things are looking bad for him and what his mother's words might honestly imply. Do you think that Melly might actually get out of jail soon? Or do you believe that he's gonna go away for a long time because of all the things that the prosecution has against him? Let us know in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.